Hello, I'm Debbie Bell Hosking for FinextraTV in our virtual studio, bringing you our Sibos 2024 series. And I'm joined by Rachel Whelan of Deutsche Bank, and we're talking about powering real-time treasury. Rachel, a big welcome to this, our virtual studio.
Thanks, Debbie. Great to be here. Looking forward to our chat today.
Absolutely. And things are moving so fast in this financial environment. So it's really interesting to talk about real-time treasury. What do you think are the drivers, the key drivers that are pushing corporates towards real-time treasury? And what's the impact on more traditional models?
So, Debbie, I think there's a lot going on at the moment, and our treasurers are pivotal in that kind of protecting their organizations and being able to manage the impact of kind of the real time treasury direction of travel. And what that means for changing business models for the organization. So I think there's several factors that are really impacting at the moment in relation to what the treasurers are having to deal with. I would break these down to probably four different factors, being the geopolitical shifts, macroeconomic trends, risk management, and also technological disruption. From a geopolitical shifts, I think this is really characterized by supply chain changes, also with the political landscape at the moment, with elections in multiple countries, and really changing those trade corridors that our treasurers have to help support their businesses to manage with. We can see this, I think, in a number of different areas in terms of how you're seeing the corridors changing. Asia into Europe, where we're seeing investment into new technologies like EVs and semiconductors. We have a massive kind of digital agenda going on and being front run by North Asia. We have investment, I suppose, across Middle East. We're seeing a lot of inflows and outflows from the Middle East, and then we're seeing a lot of investment into Germany, or from Germany into China. And then the de-risking of the relationship of the US and China is another area where we're seeing investment of the US into Asia, the wider Asia, as the Asia plus or the China plus one strategy. I think on the macroeconomics trends, obviously we're very much aware the interest environment is changing considerably, and a lot of volatility that our treasurers have to deal with, which really underpins that need for the real-time treasury management and the visibility of information. On the risk management, linking to that in terms of the macroeconomic trends and interest rate changes, risk management is one of the biggest, I think, requirements for our treasuries at the moment. And that really relies on having a visibility of data, having the visibility of money moving across the globe, their payments and their collection side, and then seeing where their liquidity sits in terms of what they have to work with. And then technological disruption. The speed of change continues, with now AI coming into the picture, open banking, APIs have been there, but really now we're seeing the front running on that. And then coupled with the instant payment agenda and G20 roadmap in relation to payments globally, I think these are all things that the treasurer is having to deal with. In terms of that traditional business models, we definitely are seeing our treasurers moving more away from selling through distributors to a kind of a direct consumer selling situation, which is very similar to some of the marketplaces that we see our fintech clients doing, which we now see more traditional corporates doing that. This business model is different and requires that need for real-time information because you're dealing directly with your consumers, and that need to be able to confirm the receipt of payment, confirm the receipt of goods, and then receipt of payment to receive goods. Is all very important then in relation to how the treasurers' businesses work. So I think the treasurers are getting really underpinned into the day-to-day workings of the business on top of their normal treasury activities. And this actually all comes now as part of this real-time treasury needs and real-time visibility.
And let's take that a bit further, because you're talking about the impact on business models, and you're also talking about the challenges that treasurers face. So let's dive a little bit deeper in terms of the challenges they face in achieving real-time efficiency, because you touched on that just as we came to a close there. What are those challenges, and how can banks help towards this?
Yeah, so I think for the treasurers, I think during good times and bad times, volatile and easy times, their main objective is liquidity management and ensuring that they are efficient as possible with that in relation to how they use it. I think the challenges they have is in relation to as that liquidity management becomes more real time, the need for security and compliance in relation to the data that they they have access to and their people have access to. I think that real time information and how they can prove that from a financial regulations perspective and consumer end perspective in relation to enabling data integrity in the end to end flows. I think that data challenge and security and compliance is a big area. From a cost perspective, obviously getting to real time and high STP and automated solutions requires investment. And I think this is an ongoing, challenge of the Treasury is making sure that they get the right investment from the wider organization into their day-to-day processes. So they have to be aligned, obviously, with the wider organization to ensure that. And the other one, I think, is the technological complexity. We know it within the bank. There's a lot of legacy and old platforms, and then you're adding new technology on top of that, which is obviously bringing the speed of change and the power of kind of technology now. Bringing the new and the old together is a big challenge, and I think the treasurers are having to deal with that and having to work out, and I think get way more tech savvy than probably before. Relying on the banks to help them with that, and being an advisor in relation to aggregators for vendor solutions, etc., instead of going point to point. But I think that's definitely a big challenge, and I suppose that's where going into what can kind of the banks do. I think implementing, as I said, the complexity of implementing a real-time treasury system is definitely should not be underestimated. The elements that have to be brought together, very complex, and especially most of our treasurers will have multi-bank relationships. They will have vendors. They will then obviously need to integrate into their own organization. That can all be very, very complex. So I think what we have, what the banks can bring to the table, and definitely I think one of the things that we within Deutsche Bank would do is very much we bring that advisory piece first to our corporates to really understand what their landscape looks like, but also what's their forward in relation to changing towards a real-time treasury setup and what is driving that, so you can really understand what the priorities are. And I think some of the things that we kind of would, out of the box, I suppose, solutions at this stage are APIs in relation to pre-validation of payments to reduce fraud in the end-to-end process, and making sure that, speed as money moves quicker, we need to ensure that it gets there securely. And I think that's one of the one of the key things in an instant payment landscape that we need to be thinking about. Cost comes into it, but I think security plays a bigger role. The other one, in terms of being able to provide real-time information, that kind of cash flow forecasting, but also being able to bring that information together to allow clients to actually see where their payments are, see where their liquidity needs are, see where their FX needs are. Some of the things we have, again, in Deutsche Bank are our workflow solutions, where we bring all of those things together, instant payments onshore, documentation requirements, liquidity requirements, and then it allows the treasurer to manage their liquidity globally. And that, again, that real-time need is a global need. And the global efficiency and cost efficiency that treasurers get, it will be powerful, but it's not going to be easy.
And what about the integration? You've spoken about integration, but what about the integration of self-service functionalities and real-time payments? How does that help towards treasury management, especially in this fast-paced financial environment you're in?
Yeah. No, spot on. I think this is where it all comes together, because I think this is where you have to, I think, have all of the components to ensure that then you have that full visibility of what's going on. I think you link your instant payments kind of, as instant payments are rolling out globally, the size of the amount you can actually send through an instant payment channel is increasing. We're seeing it in SEPA instant regulations at the moment, where the amount will become, there's no threshold, which is a big change. So if you think about that, the size of money that you can move through an instant payment rail is going to be very big. That obviously has its risks. And I think that's one of, I think, the triggers, I think, then in terms of what you have in place to be able to manage that. As I said, things like having these pre-validations and fraud checks in place, and having those as part of your embedded validations against your ecosystem of kind of beneficiaries and suppliers that are part of a corporate ecosystem. I think that's something that our corporates are definitely looking for, as well as our corporates are setting up to be able to manage that kind of liquidity story globally. They're setting up in-house banks and linked to virtual accounts, and then they're removing the amount of real accounts from their ecosystems. On top of that, I think is the 24/7 need of kind of moving that liquidity globally, which I think is a challenge, because I think we all have cut-offs. There's all clearinghouses involved, but that is becoming a real need in relation to be able to, if I've got money sitting in Singapore, I want to be able to use it in the US to make payments later in the day. So that is another kind of requirement, I think, and what our treasurers are asking for. I think other things around the data then. So if you're reporting information, being able to get that real time information back in relation to how much is in your account. So before, our treasurers would use intraday statements, MT940s and MT941s. Now we're looking at real time information being sent over API, so they can see where their funds are globally and then make decisions accordingly. I think instant payments itself, as I said, creates the challenge of that liquidity requirement, because obviously if you can pay quickly, you obviously have to fund those payments. There's no 2-day delay in relation to that. So I think that in its own right is a challenge, but then there's also the benefit, because I think our treasurers can decide to make payments at different times in the day based on their liquidity. So if they have that real-time information, then their decision-making becomes easier, or well, they have more decision-making tools that then they can link back. So you have, obviously, if you bring all that data together, I think it's very, very powerful. And then the other one, I suppose, is the APIs and the standard connectivity. And that's probably aligned with kind of standard message formats like ISO, and utilizing that in end-to-end systems, connectivities to ERPs and TMSs, and actually that standard message formats, and then that standard kind of protocols in relation to what API connectivities. I think that starts to then bring the wider ecosystem for our treasurers together in relation to the multiple banks that they deal with.
Rachel, wow. I mean, we opened up with talking about powering real-time treasury. You've given us so much insight and background, and it's just so interesting how you're talking about balancing those challenges with the benefits, and looking ahead, and also where you touch on the future and those big real-time payments. So definitely an interesting space to watch. And thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Debbie. Privileged to be here. So thanks very much for the chat.